We have an interesting video today. Zone Zero has a Void Hunter problem. Now, I low-key think this isn't really going to be a massive problem because other games can relate to this type of problem of, excuse me, the overpowered character archetype trope, as in they just have a certain archetype of characters, Sentinel Resonators, Emanators, Archons, Pilgrims and Nikkei, etc., right? The top of the cream of the crop overpowered character. That's just gonna sell well.
I'm sure you've all seen this graph. The picture is clear. After the launch, the only banners that perform are the Void Hunters. But how did we get here? Why does it seem like the player base only cares about Void Hunters? This is something I think about a lot because I spend way too much time playing and thinking about this game. In this video, I'll go over how we got here and what Hoyo can do to fix this problem. First off, what is a Void Hunter? I could give you the lore reason that I don't really care about, but for our purposes, it's a marketing tactic. It's the flagship product. The Void Hunters are the ones who get the big marketing push. These are the characters that Hoyo all but indicates are good to have on your account, and they do their best to make sure you know that both in and out of game. Well, hold on a second. Flagship products aren't a new concept. Heck, not even in gacha games. Genshin has their Archons, Honkai Star Rail has their main pushes, etc. Yet most other games do not have such enormous differences in their peaks and median. That means that there's more going on than just being the flagship product. Let's get into how they were implemented into Zone Zero. Miyabi was the first Void Hunter. She was ridiculously strong and still is. When she came out, she was obliterating everything and more, and through the discovery of more advanced rotations and teams, she was easily surpassing what the devs thought was possible. Then came Yishuan, who not only introduced a new class, she also felt just as strong. Finally, we have Ye Guang, who once again broke the damage ceiling and is currently the top DPS. So why do people only care about Void Hunters? Let's start with some of the more obvious points first. For starters, Void Hunters are generally the strongest characters, especially during the release. This is a
Yeah, that is true. Oh well, he's about.
gacha game, and pulling powerful characters is part of the fun. Most people play games to relax and have fun, so it makes sense that people opt for the easiest solution to challenges. But hold on a second, this is most definitely not the whole story. Every gacha game has characters that are stronger than others, but that alone doesn't cause such a gap in revenue. And heck, I can very easily make the argument that the 3 Void Hunters so far aren't even the top 3 strongest characters in the game. Dalian, Yuzuha, and Nangong will objectively help you clear content easier than having the Void Hunters alone.
That is so true. That is so true. Just because you have a Void Hunter on your account doesn't mean you're gonna clear and obliterate every single thing. Shoot your reset in the game. It's just not possible. It is not possible. For people who say that Void Hunters clear everything, you have not played the game. I literally went into DA and cleared the boss on the right side. He's the electrical abomination or whatever the fuck he's called, the mechanical one. The 1.x boss from Coleta's whole Bellabot Industry bullshit. I beat that boss with a Nekobata. And I used Suna, Dialin, Norma, etc. I cleared it using with Nekomata, bro. Now, yes, was it max potential buff to Nekomata? Hell yeah, it was. But I used the tools that I have to clear it. And that's how these gacha games work. You have to use the tools you have to clear shit. And just because you have a Void Hunter doesn't mean you're going to clear everything.
Miyabi without at least one of Nangong or Yuzuha isn't destroying anything easily. Ye Guang without at least one of Dalian, Suna, or Zhao feels absolutely terrible to play. And if I told you what
Oh my god. Yeah, bro. Playing
Ye Guang without
playing Ye Guan without Dialin feels terrible. It just does not feel fun because you just don't get the satisfaction of double ults. And then even Zhao, plus with Zhao. If you're not using Zhao with fucking Ye Guang, what are you doing? I'm being dead ass. What are you doing if you're not playing with those characters?
at least one of Dalian, Suna, or Zhao feels absolutely terrible to play. And if I told you what Dalian's kit is and told you she was a Void Hunter, I think you'd instantly believe me. Yet Dalian and Nangong's sales don't come anywhere close to the Void Hunters, so that means there's more to the story. Well, combat is one part of the game. The other biggest part is the story, and Void Hunters also objectively receive the most attention in the story. So let's go to theory number 2. Void Hunters get the most sales because how much emphasis the story puts on them. Patch 1.4 was all about Miyabi. The Wi-Fi arc started with Yishuan, then they spent each subsequent patch figuring out an excuse to get her out of the story so they could focus on the other characters. And Ye Guang hogged the story of 2 story patches to herself. Conversely, Dalian was sidelined in the story in favor of Ye Guang, and Nangong hardly has any stories, so maybe story involvement is the reason why Void Hunters are so dominant. Fair enough. However, these aren't the only stories in the game. Miyabi was mostly absent from the story after 1.4, yet the characters that the story gave a spotlight to didn't perform nearly as well as her. And heck, these aren't the only characters that have a big story presence. Sissy and Billy at this point are more prominent in the story than any Void Hunter in my opinion, yet Sissy and Starlight Bellies are among the bottom performers. Meanwhile, Nangong, who has almost no story presence, is slightly above average. So once again, this isn't the whole story. I'm personally not very bought into story-related theories, mostly because you don't need to pull a character if you appreciate them in the story. It might help swing the decision, but I don't think that's the main reason why people pull characters. I think people
It is one of the it is definitely one of the reasons. It is one of the reasons because a story can sway somebody's opinion to pull a character. Like for instance, Cecilia. Do you know how many people were talking about not pulling Cecilia in the beginning because of her design, and then when they actually saw her in the story, they were like, "I want to pull for this character. No, I want to pull for Cecilia now. I think she's peak." It's that simple. So story can have a big emphasis, but I don't think it's the main picture of what he's talking about with the Void Hunters.
pull characters to use them, and in this game you're mostly using your characters to fight stuff and shield defense and deadly assault. These are game modes with rotating enemies and buffs, generally made to favor the current on-banner characters. However, Void Hunters are generally favored here. So theory number 3, people only focus on Void Hunters because the endgame game modes tend to favor them. In gacha games, favorable conditions for certain characters is called shill, so I'll be using that word more often in this video. It's hard to deny that shilling is pretty strict in this game. Not only do bosses have certain conditions that very obviously favor certain characters, the buffs also double up on these bonuses. This is a gacha game after all, and this is one of their tactics to encourage you to pull the banners. I think this is the weakest theory so far because the shelling problem isn't only for Void Hunters. In shield defense, it's hard to deny that there has been a Yashin Guang floor every rotation, but it's also hard to argue that slamming all 3 Void Hunters on each floor would be the objective best teams to use. And in Deadly Assault, there are plenty of bosses that don't show Void Hunters. Starting from patch 2.4, Thrall is a dial-in boss, 2.5 has the Yashin Guang boss, 2.6 has the Arya Nangong boss, patch 2.7 has the Nangong boss, patch 2.8 has the Promia boss, and patch 3.0 has the Valina boss.
Yeah, yeah. To say that DA chills out these Void Hunters like crazy, no. Some of these bosses, they're built to not be fucking used against Void Hunters. Like for instance, if you using Miyabi against Thrall is just don't even try it, bro. Don't even try it.
Only one of these was very favorable to a Void Hunter. So heck, with all the non-Void Hunter shill bosses, I'd say if selling characters with shelling was intent, they clearly failed. If the main thing you do in this game is fight stuff, but fights favor non-Void Hunters, why do they not get the same attention? Well, Endgame is meant to be a slight challenge. Sure, it can obviously be made easier by pulling on the gacha, but I personally consider spending hundreds of dollars to make some stages easier a bad use of money. However, not everyone thinks like I do, so this brings me to theory number 4. Zenless Zone Zero is naturally a harder game, so this makes people gravitate towards the characters that seem the most powerful. First, let's address the baseline difficulty. The game is way more complex than meets the eye. If you remember criticisms back in 1.0, you would probably remember people saying that there's no depth and it's a basic attack masher, etc. That's because the game was easy back then. The story didn't require you to do much, and it can't by this being virtue of a gacha game. It's only once you start facing challenges that you actually learn and figure out mechanics. For example, I don't believe this game does a good job of teaching about stun windows. It might seem obvious, but from watching casual players play, they don't internalize the concept of saving your damage for when you're going to do the most damage until you actually tell them. Heck, most mobile players aren't even aware that you can swap to your previous character. There's lots of seemingly basic stuff like this that the average and medium player just don't know. And I'm willing to bet the vast majority of players don't go out of their way to actually learn and figure this stuff out. So when they get faced with a challenge, their instinct is to just unga bunga with the strongest character they have on hand, which is probably the Void Hunter. Like I mentioned earlier, players often default to the path of least resistance. They would rather brute force a stage with a Void Hunter than struggle just a little bit more learning a good rotation on a character that's slightly weaker. I find this incredibly ironic given that I've just mentioned the shelling problem, where on a lot of these bosses, the path of least resistance is actually to not use a Void Hunter. However,
There is a way for me to increase my damage output with like the manual chain attacks because I think I have auto chain attacks on. But if I was able to do manual, I can probably increase my damage output and my clears a lot more. It's just I need to find the time to actually sit down and learn the manual chain attacks. Some people are gonna say it's the easiest thing ever. Probably not for me. I ain't gonna lie to you, because there's also the double chain attack canceling thing. There's a lot of like advanced tech to be able to get better clears that I could do if I really wanted to, but I just kind of choose not to sometimes.
the perception still lingers, especially among the less engaged players. I think this theory has the most merit so far, but there's one simple point to disprove it, and that is that the majority of the player base never even touches the endgame. I don't have the exact stats, but this is something that's consistent across every gacha. Heck, I can say every game, not even including gacha. While the endgame can present the challenge to players who reach it, this clearly doesn't matter to the vast majority of people who never even touch it. So far, something that each of my theories all have in common is that it addresses points in the game. These are all things that people who actively play the game are aware of. And if you're more involved in the game, you probably have less of a Void Hunter dependency. So maybe to get to the root of the issue, we have to zoom out. The Void Hunter thing is happening across the entire player base at large. This means that anything that statistically only a small percentage of players even experience or notice isn't going to be the root issue. So why do Void Hunters appeal to casual players so much more than every other character? Well, what if I've been looking at this wrong the whole time? Because this entire video, I've been framing the Void Hunter thing in a glass half empty kind of way. What if these other banners are actually just a baseline and Void Hunters are the big overperformers? Theory number 5, Zenless Zone Zero just isn't as popular as you might think it is, and Void Hunters actually successfully attract a larger audience. Usually when anything is successful, it's because it's able to reach audiences or customers that are beyond the initial target audience. Gacha games aren't any exception. How many of you have re-downloaded a game for a banner that was particularly hyped? Of those of you who said yes, how many of you dropped the game soon after for whatever reason? When this is the case,
DK. I logged in for the Red Hood for the free Red Hood skin, got Red Hood Rappi like later down the line, and then I just uninstalled. I'm not gonna hold you, and then I uninstalled. But yeah, this point is very true though. Zenless Zone Zero as a whole is just not as popular as what people may think it is. It is not as popular. It is the niche big gotcha game. Now, niche and big, putting those two adjectives together does not make any fucking sense. But in this context, it is technically it is a big gotcha game with the other gotchas like HSR, Genshin Impact, and Wuthering Waves, and Arknights Enfield. But Arknights Enfield and Zenless Zone Zero have niched their audience down to a point where they mainly are providing for their target audience. You get what I mean? So the games are inherently big in production, and they have a lot going for them. Their audience, however, and player base are very condensed, very niche. You get what I mean?
you're only really there because of the hype. However, it did what it was supposed to. Remember how at the start of the video I said that Void Hunters are a marketing tactic? Well, without the context of every other banner, I'd say that this is generally when all hands are on deck for advertising this game, and for all intents and purposes, it does succeed. Honestly, at this point, who cares about endgame and chilling and story? I pulled the character and participated in the big event that everyone else is doing. I think this theory is closest to being correct, but there's still one big problem. Even if these big events are successful, the gap is way too big to be healthy. While I'm sure Hoyo is glad that Void Hunters perform well, what happens when suddenly a Void Hunter loses that magic? And as much as Hoyo does to push the Void Hunters, it's not like they don't push the non-Void Hunters at all. They get fun animations, DPs, and whatnot, but a lot of that effort doesn't get rewarded in the same way Void Hunters do. If none of these theories are solid, what is the main reason for the Void Hunter problem? I think it's a combination of all of them. Most of these factors alone wouldn't cause such a large disparity between a Void Hunter banner and a non-Void Hunter banner. However, when we add all of them together, we end up with the Void Hunter banner earning more than all other banners preceding it until the previous Void Hunter banner. So what does Hoyo do about this? First off, I think it's worth addressing. Does Hoyo even need to address this? After all, I'm not the one who needs to care about the revenue, and neither should you. If Hoyo thinks the game is earning enough, then they have no reason to change the status quo.
Yeah, basically. Like, if Hoyo doesn't see this as a problem, which clearly they're able to keep producing characters, producing money, and making a lot of shit. I mean, they have an HSR collab now, which sounds a nothing burger to most, but it's actually a lot. It's a pretty big deal. That means Zenless Zone Zero finally gets a collab. We haven't had a collab for fucking since the game came out, like 2 years since the game came out, and it's finally coming to fruition.
I think it's a shame that a lot of players have the mentality that it's not a Void Hunter, so it's not worth my pulls. A lot of non-Void Hunters have really fun and interesting kits that get overlooked because they aren't Void Hunters. That's a shame. I really feel like these people are robbing themselves of a lot of personal enjoyment out of the game, whether because they think non-Void Hunters aren't strong enough, or just that they don't have the Void Hunter label. Also, if Void Hunters are the only banners that matter to most players, it makes the game feel more dead in between Void Hunters. Now, it always doesn't have to be popping up in new Eridu, but if patches feel like there's nothing there because there's no Void Hunter, it greatly affects their enjoyment and engagement with the game.
Yeah, I was gonna say I like Void Hunters next to the like. Oh, I do like strong characters and Void Hunters, but holy shit. If I was only playing Void Hunters and only pulling them, bro, I would be so fucking bored. I'm not gonna hold you. I would be so fucking bored, dude. That's why I was pulling different characters in Nikke because I did not want to only pull for pilgrims. I did not want to pull for pilgrims. I didn't want to only pull for archons in Genshin. I didn't want to only pull for emanators in HSR or sentinel resonators in Wuwa. I didn't want to just only pull the strongest fucking character because it would be fucking boring. I want to create a whole bunch of variety of teams. And without their best supports or best teammates, these characters are shit.
So yeah, I think the Void Hunter problem is one worth solving. Let's say hoyoverse wants to do something about it. What should they do? I've got a few ideas. The first one is something they're already doing, which is making Void Hunters not main DPS. The newest Void Hunter in Remiel looks to be an off-field anomaly support. I'll still talk about why making the first 3 DPS was such a big problem. First off, gacha players tend to gravitate towards DPS characters. Most people who have even the slightest knowledge of meta know that support characters are just as, if not more important, but that's not the majority of players. Most players see the DPS character do the big numbers, so that's where their attention and money goes to make that number go up. This is not just a ZZ thing.
Yeah, they can see those big numbers, but if you don't have the teammates or supports for those big numbers, then what's the point of the character?
Now what happens if the Void Hunter is a support? Suddenly, people also feel like they need to get some teammates to get the full package. Suddenly, you do care about what DPS also pairs with your Void Hunter support. Honestly, it's hard for me to explain why it doesn't work in reverse.
Because I forgot I have Remiel and Belina, and holy shit, they are so good. That team is so fucking good. I was one of the smart people to actually pull for Valina because the wind element and get Remiel Dan because, well, they're both they're going to be buffing Anomaly. They buff Anomaly to a crazy hell and back. So, of course, I'm going to get the 2 characters that help out Anomaly as a whole.
Why did so people get dialed in when she boosts Yishuan so significantly and is one of Ye Guang's best teammates? If I were to guess, maybe it's negative reinforcement. Hoyo does inflate the enemy HP, so your Yishuan kind of feels weaker patch to patch, so instead of going, oh, I'll get dialed in to make her feel shiny again, players just say, screw you Hoyo and your HP inflation. It feels like they're trying to sell the solution when they do this. The other guess I have is that fewer people are actually paying attention, so they just aren't aware that dial-in is even happening, or they just don't care since they aren't currently playing. I'm a little more forgiving of this. I have less sympathy for people who are actively paying attention because there's a strong irony in people skipping powerful supports to go all in for the powerful Void Hunter, where their accounts would be much stronger with just a single strong support. There's one big thing Hoyo has to remember, which is that off-field characters are inherently less satisfying for players than DPS, which might make people less interested or disappointed in the Void Hunter. I'm sure.
Which is crazy to say because Remiel Dan, the way her kit is, you can do burst damage, you can actually on-field her for a little bit, then she goes off the field. She gives you a time stop ability to prevent enemies from take damage, and you can also use your ultimate and stuff. She's actually satisfied to play a little bit off field just to get a little bit charge up a little bit of energy. So I'm glad they're doing this. I'm hoping later down the line we'll get more interesting Void Hunter types like a tank. Maybe I'm trying to think what else do we have? Because we already have an attacker, we already have a rupture, we have anomaly. Yeah, like a full-blown supporter. Yeah, like a full-blown support, a tank. Damn, we already knocked all of them out. Well, yeah, that's it. Just yeah, like tank and then support fully blown supporter. I think we can get those.
A lot of you guys have seen people upset that Remiel is mostly off-field. I'm pretty sure this is why she has very noticeable and long animations. Since this is something Hoyo is currently doing, we'll just have to see how it pans out. Will the Void Hunter only people stick around to get a new Anomaly DPS to pair with their shiny Void Hunter, or will they ignore everything until Sunbringer? Something else Hoyo can do is make more banners feel like big events. After all, if the big events are doing well, why not just do more of them? Well, this sounds easier than it actually is. It's not like Hoyo can just up and add a bunch of new Void Hunters, especially since they already have some established lore. And if it feels forced, like they are trying to create more Void Hunters without them actually being Void Hunters, it will give the wrong impression. Also, they've kind of tried this before. Different character forms usually perform well, especially when they're beloved characters. However, they already tried this with Andy and Billy and fumbled it both times for different reasons. But what is common is that they didn't really treat these like events. They were both just another character. Even though they are both part of the OG Cunning Hairs, they have been absent enough from the story until their special forms that it was hard to care too much. And Billy was especially done dirty since he's not that much better than Ye Guang, who most players already pulled. Nicole is the only Cunning Hair left without a special form, and I think she's the most popular of the 3, so this is a good chance to see if they can make a bigger event out of a non-Void Hunter. If Hoyo gives inevitable special Nicole the right treatment, and it's hard to imagine that they wouldn't, Hoyo will probably have a better idea whether or not this is something worth pursuing. Let's get into the next suggestion I have, which is also already in motion, which is to improve the story. Let's be honest, the Wi-Fi arc sucked. I'm sure there are ways to defend it, and you probably have a couple of patches that you like, but the story overall was lacking. When the story is lacking, it's harder to get attached to the characters. Rose Califer, in addition to the pre-Rose Califer stories, were all better than the Wi-Fi arc. It's hard for me to say this will move the needle too much, because the improved story quality didn't help the banners before Remiel too much. However, one thing that a better story does is keep people engaged in between patches and looking forward to the next one, which brings me to my final and probably most important suggestion. The game.
That is true. Yeah, that's true. Like I said earlier, story is another big factor for people pulling characters. If the story is really good for people, especially the characters like Cecilia, then yeah, they're gonna fucking pull them. People enjoy Norma. People love fucking Norma. Double entendre. People really love Norma from the story, just for how she is in the story, her looks, and her kit as well.
Needs more casual or mid-level content to keep players engaged in between patches. I do believe that my fifth theory is the strongest, and this is the most important suggestion to remedy this. If the large masses aren't sticking around in between patches, it's worth examining why. If you look at what a typical ZZZ patch consists of, it's got a story, some events, the daily weekly grind, and the endgame. Daily and weekly grind is just something with gachas, so I won't discuss that here. The story, while improving, is just 2, maybe up to 4 hours of a patch and comes once every 6 weeks. I'd hardly consider the minigame events the reason someone sticks around and pulls banners patch upon patch, even if I think they're mostly good enough. And that leaves the endgame. It's great for sweaty players like myself. Completion for rewards is easy enough for me, and the scoring systems give me an objective measurement to chase better results. However, DPS check game modes aren't for everyone, so if you don't like this style of stage, there isn't really much else to do. So there's a very casual content in the story, and I'd say the endgame is currently sufficient for the more hardcore players like myself, but there's currently a very big gap in the middle. There isn't really much for people who like the game and want to do more, but aren't quite at the optimizing rotations or scoreless point yet. Maybe you can count Hollow Zero here, but I don't quite think it's fun enough to fully fill that gap, mostly because of roguelike elements feel cosmetic most of the time. Maybe you can put Battle Tower here, but while it's generally well received, I also don't think it quite has the same love that the endgame modes in Shield Defense and Deadly Assault have. So what can Hoyo add to fill the gap? The big open world games like Genshin have the open world to explore. So what can a non-open world game like ZZZ do to fill the void other than copying that, but worse? The first thing is something that they are probably already working on, given that it's already shown up as an event in co-op. Whether or not this comes back and successfully fills a gap depends on how well they're implementing it and when it comes back. Combat events are another thing.
They should do this. That is true. They need to bring back co-op. Co-op is it was actually a fun mode. I'm not gonna hold you. It really was a fun mode for co-op. I don't know why they did it one time and that was it. If it comes back as a permanent mode, mm, mm, that'd be dope. Oh yeah, and combat events are also fun too.
They've done the swapping thing recently and even added a ranking, so whether or not they plan on making that come back more often is up to them. However, these are too infrequent to be a permanent solution. If I were to point to probably the best solution to the midcore content problem so far, it would probably be Currency Wars and Honkai Star Rail. You get to have fun with the characters you pulled, and there's enough variety and challenge there so it doesn't get stale, and at least for a few patches, it has enough content to keep people busy. If I were to craft the perfect midcore game mode, something that the midcore content should accomplish is teaching and rewarding players for naturally playing better without the pressure of the timer. For example,
Ooh, bro, a currency wars? I think that would be pretty fucking dope. I'm not gonna hold you. And ZZZ? Nah, that would be pretty cool.
playing around some windows and doing proper character combos. This would expose people to more characters and encourage them to play or even potentially get non-void hunters. This would also help players get rid of their void hunter dependency without having to look for external resources, which most players aren't doing. Ideally, it also lets players try and encourage supports like Dalin or Nangong to show how much value they actually bring.
The thing is, we also have Annihilation, the Annihilation mode, which I do not even think a lot of people even know about. But Annihilation mode literally gives you all of the characters for a trial use for free. That means Void Hunters, the supporters, anybody is free. You can literally mix and match teams if you want and just have fun and fuck around with a character team if you really so want to. But they don't really push out Annihilation mode like that, so it's a really good mode. I understood what they're doing, but man, they need to flesh it out.
Let people know that characters like Arya, Promi, and Banyue are actually fun and are far more than enough to clear endgame without needing Void Hunters. It would help people understand the value of non-Void Hunters in a way that no story improvements or shelling can replicate. Ultimately, I'm not a game designer. I'm not saying they need to copy Currency Wars, nor that Currency Wars accomplishes everything I stated, but they do need something for less hardcore players to stay invested in between patches. I know that what I suggested sounds like a big ask, but I do feel like that's a really big thing that the game is lacking that's causing the more casual players to churn in between Void Hunters. The one drawback of figuring this out is that you need an update cadence that's short enough to feel meaningful, but not too short or else it feels like it adds to the stack of dealing and weekly chores. Whether or not Hoyo follows through on fixing the Void Hunter problem is up to them. No single factor created the Void Hunter problem and no single fix will solve it, but addressing enough of them together might shift the balance. Whether it's the Void Hunters dwarfing the other banners or the other banners just not garnering the same attention that Void Hunters do, the problem is the same. Fewer DPS Void Hunters, more big event banners, a better story, and mid-core content, I think would all go a long way to help solve the Void Hunter problem. And given that at least 2 of these are already in motion, I'm feeling hopeful. This is a really big topic, and I'm certain there are reasons or solutions that I didn't touch on. If you think there's anything I missed, I'd love to hear it in the comments. If you made it this far in the video, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I'd appreciate a like and a sub. I have a Discord server.
I generally think the Void Hunter problem is it's only there because obviously a lot of reasons, but the big reason in my opinion is the game is just niche. Like Zone Zero is a pretty niche of a game, and they mainly do big pushes for the important characters like Void Hunters. That's just me though. But what do you guys think about this whole issue? Do you think there's a really big Void Hunter issue, or was the things that he was talking about really like spitting facts? Let me know in the comments below.